Okay, so when it came on to the production of this what if, I was just trying to figure out a way to actually set it up in the first place. So I ended up going to Neptune about it, and yeah, shout out to Neptune for basically helping me organize a way to actually incorporate a way for me to actually start off the Red Hulk what if without just having to resort to saying that, oh, it's just Izuku's quake. Now let's roll that, not roll that intro, but let's actually get into the video now. I know I sound dead, but it's because it's 1 AM. Anyways, All For One had heard about the latest successor to One For All. He realized that this one, they were a cut about the rest, at least when it came on to the former vessels of One For All. This one seemingly could give All For One a run for his money, but he had a plan though. You see, over the years, All For One would actually invest in a new project. Dr. Ujiko would still be in the middle of creating Nomus, but when he created Karaguri, All For One, well, he had an idea. It would be to create something that All Might simply couldn't punch away. Something that was strong, but it also had the potential to grow indestructible capabilities how do you pronounce this character's name? Gigantomachia? Or Gigant... Yes, girl, I'm just calling him Gigantomachia. Y'all correct me in the comments if I got it wrong. But he didn't have a clear vision of what exactly he wanted though. Well, that was until after he fought All Might and the blonde ended up bashing his face in. All For One was bitter from being crippled by the blonde, but he did manage to land some life-threatening blows on his arch-enemy, so it was sort of an eye for an eye in this case. All For One had two avenues he could go about here. The first being to create a Nomu that had shock absorption and an incredible amount of physical strength. The second option was to create something that All Might simply couldn't get close to. He would have gone through several experiments over the years, with many ending up as failures when it came on to the second option. Eventually, All For One would just decide to call in a favor from one of his associates who lived on Island, basically somebody that would be more equipped for this sort of project. He would have sent his plans over to the scientist, and they would cover the plans up by explaining to their colleagues that they were just trying to create something that they would like to dub an artificial quirk, something that would genuinely make history. It would be something that they could actually give out to quirkless people all over the world so that they wouldn't have to feel like outcasts any longer. Some of the procedures would be reworked though, since other scientists would find that there were issues with the original formula. The formation of the artificial quirk would have been almost complete when a 13-year-old Izuku's class would make their way to Island for a field trip. Other scientists would have found out about what All For One's associate was doing alongside their comrades. And of course, they would end up finding this experiment to be far too dangerous. The artificial quirk seemed far too unstable to actually be continued. At any moment, it seemed like their experiment would just blow up in everybody's faces. They would try to stop the experiment, but it would have been too late. Izuku would have been running away from a couple of his classmates who were picking on him at this time. He was trying to escape from their torment. He wouldn't be paying attention to where he was going though. Izuku would now be lost. He would wander around the island hoping to find any hints as to where the rest of his class went. He would end up encountering a couple of scientists while exploring though. They seemed to be having some sort of argument. Izuku would be hesitant of walking up to them, but he would realize he had no other choice right now. These were the only guys that he was really able to find, and they seemed like the ones to actually have real information. So Izuku would walk up to them after he saw some other ones leave the scene. Izuku would walk up to ask the remaining few a question. This question being, of course, where his class went. He would pause though when seeing something red contained in a glass container. It looked really unstable in his opinion. It was shaking violently. Izuku would begin to take a couple of steps back as he saw it getting larger. The scientists, they would run away from the scene, not even realizing that Izuku was there as well. Izuku would try to run, but the red substance, it would have actually exploded at this moment. Izuku would be sent flying. He would black out. When he woke up, he would find himself in a hospital. His mother, she just would have been sitting in the chair by the side of the bed. Seeing that her son was awake, she would actually begin to cry. She would hug him in response. Izuku would question what happened though. Inko, she would explain how there was a freak accident back at Island. He had apparently been caught up in the explosion, but thankfully he was far enough to where his injuries weren't life-threatening. Mainly some broken bones and a concussion, but Izuku would still be able to live. Izuku would remember everything that happened now, but he would find it odd that he felt completely fine though. He would unwrap his bandages, much to his mother's displeasure. He would move around his arms and he would actually realize he had no injuries whatsoever. The doctors would walk into the room and be surprised to find this out as well. Did he have some sort of regeneration cord? But no, on his files it said that he was quirkless. Maybe he just got lucky. That's probably what the doctors were thinking at that time. The doctors would of course be surprised, but they would just be allowed to check out at the hospital. Once Izuku was done testing with the doctors in order to see whether or not he was really in a good condition, Izuku would be brought back to school the week after, and during this week Izuku would get picked on once more. It was as if nothing changed, and one day Izuku would be trying to defend himself, but he would get pushed down to the ground. He would fall into some mud, which would ruin his uniform. All of the kids around there would laugh at him. Izuku, he would have been humiliated. Izuku at this moment, he would experience a new set of emotions. He would experience anger and the desperation to get stronger. Izuku would pick himself up and he would turn to the people who were picking on him. Izuku wouldn't have noticed it at first, but his skin, it was turning red. It was shifting colors for some reason. he would begin to grow as well. His clothes, they would begin to tear as his muscles, they expanded as if they were balloons. Izuku would be towering over one of his bullies, and he would sucker punch them. They would be sent flying. Izuku, he wouldn't have been thinking at this moment. He just wanted to be strong enough to defend himself for once. His inner desires were becoming a reality right now, but he had no understanding of his newfound strength. The boy Izuku had punched, well, let's just say he used his full strength on them, and it caused them to actually become paste a few seconds later. The other kids, they would grow fearful of Izuku seeing this. Most would just scream, running away. The only one who would try to stay somewhat calm in the situation was, of course, Bakugo. Well, interestingly enough, he would try to protect their classmates against the monster Izuku turned into by becoming a distraction. Well, he wanted to see if he could even compete with the state Izuku was in too. Which, spoiler alert, he wasn't. Izuku would grab the ash blonde and he would actually squeeze the life out of him. Bakugo's blood would have been boiling while in Izuku's hands. Everyone would run in fear of the atrocities they had just witnessed here. Izuku would have gotten the attention of nearby heroes, and they would try to apprehend Izuku as well. They wouldn't be able to get close to Izuku though. He was generating too much heat for some reason. It felt like an oven whenever they got close to Izuku. Izuku would be confused as to why the heroes were attacking him. In his mind, this was all just a bad dream. More heroes would arrive on the scene though, attempting to fight Izuku. Izuku would continuously try to defend himself. He would try to defend himself, but most of the heroes would just continue to attack, even when it was proven that their attacks were ineffective against Izuku. The few that did manage to hurt Izuku, he will quickly heal from though. The fight against Izuku would make it onto the news at this point. Dr. Uchiko would hear about about there being a giant red being fending off against several heroes. It seemed like the monster was what people were saying, unstoppable. They could generate heat that would put most pyro heats to shame. Their physical strength was off the charts and they had a healing factor. Dr. Izuku, he would immediately go to find Alpha One and report the news to him. They would find out where the fight was happening and they would quickly have Kurogiri teleport the experiment over to the base before the blonde annoyance known as All Might made his way to their experiment and basically took them into custody. Dr. Izuku would shoot a series of heat-resistant and tranquilizers at Izuku as soon as Kurogiri teleported him over. Interestingly enough though, Izuku, he wouldn't de-transform. He wouldn't turn back into his human self. When Izuku did wake up, he would find that he was still in this red state, and he was in a pretty unfamiliar environment. Alpha One would actually walk up to Izuku, and he would explain his situation, the sort of predicament that Izuku was in right now. was less than ideal. Yes, he had power now, but he didn't really know how to control it. On top of that, it awakened at the worst time possible, when he was under emotional distress. He was getting picked on for being powerless at the time, and Izuku had seemingly unlocked this new ability. In response, next thing you know, he somehow became a murderer. But of course, All For One would mention that things had changed now. Izuku, sure, he had power, but he also had a criminal record. He didn't really count it as Izuku's fault though. After all, these kids were the ones to be picking on him throughout most of his life. These were the kids that had picked on him for being powerless for who knows how long, to be honest. So if anything, those kids were in the wrong. They deserved it. They made his life miserable, so it made sense why they would be the ones to die. They were the ones that deserved to suffer, not Izuku. All For One would just continue to sweet talk Izuku until he believed that, well, All For One actually had his best interests in mind. He would even offer Izuku the chance to learn how to gain control over his new abilities. Izuku wouldn't be allowed to show his face to the public after what he did back at the school, so he didn't really have much of a choice but to listen to All For One. And over the course of 2 years, All For One would help Izuku understand what he could do with his newfound powers. He could switch between his regular form and, well, his red form as well. He could theoretically remain in his Red Hulk form indefinitely. They tested it out by having Izuku go a month in the Hulk form without switching back to his human self at any point. There didn't appear to be any form of consequences from staying in the Red Hulk form, beyond him having to adjust his strength more so he wouldn't break anything. Well, break everything. Of course, he was going to break a couple of things, and they would rather not just have like all of their most priceless items be destroyed. There are other projects that they had been working on for a while now. Izuku would actually spar with some of the Nomu, and he would learn about his control over heat during some of these spars. He could become hot enough to cause a person's skin to actually boil just from being in close proximity of him. This would have originated from his anger too. The angrier Izuku became, the, well, warmer he would get as well. Izuku would be told several stories about how All Might was actually a terrible hero during those 2 years that he remained under All For One's guidance. Izuku would become disillusioned to the world of heroes. It really wasn't as glamorous as he once thought. As a matter of fact, it seemed like most heroes, they were just in it for the fame and the glory, the fortune that came with it. All For One would show himself in a good light though. He would explain that he was just trying to make the world a better place. Those that didn't want quirks, well, they didn't have to. Those that were born with bad quirks or anything, well, All For One could just simply remove it, and those who wanted quirks, well, All For One could actually pass on quirks to the quirkless as well. He was making the world fair for once, but his actions were somehow considered villainous. Several heroes, they were trying to fight All For One over the years, with him beginning to wear and tear over time. Eventually, All Might would be the one to appear, and he would completely destroy everything he had managed to build up. The society that Izuku lived in, it was flawed, but with All For One's guidance, Izuku would understand that they could make it a better place. After those 2 years, Shigaraki would actually break into UA, and he would retrieve student files. Everyone would find out that it was true. All Might would be teaching Class 1A and that they were actually having a field trip to USJ soon. He would plan accordingly. Shigaraki, he would recruit as many villains from off the streets as possible. The anti-All Might Nomu, they would have had last-minute adjustments. Izuku, he would have been given a makeover by All For One, thanks to a quirk he had recently gotten, or at least, that's what All For One told Izuku. The whole part about getting the quirk recently. Izuku would use the last day before going to USJ to see if his mother still lived in the same apartment, and to see if she was alright. He knew it would have been hard dealing with the fact her son was a murderer after all, even if he wasn't in the right state of mind at the time. It didn't change the fact that Izuku did have blood on his hands. When he made his way to the apartment, he would notice graffiti all over the door though. The window would have been broken into as well. Izuku would raise an eyebrow to all of this. He would read the graffiti and see how vulgar the words were. Izuku would find that the door was unlocked too. This was very, very, very strange. He would walk inside and see the place was trashed. It reeked in there too. He didn't know why. He would freeze when seeing something absolutely horrifying though. On the ground would be a skinny version of his mother. It looked as if she was severely underweight. Her mouth, it would have been gaping wide and her eyes rolled to the back of her head. She was a source of the detestable smell. In her hand was a spilled bottle of pills. Izuku would tear up and run out of the building. He would make his way back to All For One, his resolve now at 100% capacity. The society they lived in was truly wretched. To have such a sweet, innocent woman like his mother suffer this way was unforgivable. The fact heroes didn't even send her to a safer location made Izuku understand firsthand that the system needed to be collapsed. The government didn't really care about the victims at all, or the people that had to deal with the consequences of another person's actions, of a villain's actions. They didn't care if they had any sort of connection at all, unless it was that they were some sort of accomplice in the crime. If it was a family member that could possibly be threatened by others, well, the government just seemingly turned a blind eye to them. Izuku really wanted to destroy this system and build up a new one, but in order to actually collapse this current system that they lived in, he would have to take down the heroes. The one at the top would be the very first one. Of course, it would all start with All Might, the symbol of peace. He genuinely used to admire the man, but All For One had opened up Izuku's eyes to the truth, you could say. So of course, by the next day, Kirigiri, he would actually create a portal for Izuku and multiple other villains to walk through. No villain did recognize Izuku though, thanks to his disguise at the time. Izuku realized he was a wanted man after that event 2 years ago, and it didn't seem to have cooled down all that much. While he went to go check on his mother, he remembered seeing some newspapers. They talked about the mysterious monster of a man that just appeared one day and vanished all in the same day. It was extremely unusual with how powerful this guy was after all. Izuku, he wouldn't concern himself with all those news articles though. His attention was on, well, UA. It used to be his dream school that he planned on going to one day to become a hero. But those dreams, they were long gone by now. When he walked through the portal, a boy with red hair would actually point out how UA just seemingly was pulling out all the stops for their kids. After all, they literally brought fake villains inside, people who were acting as supposed villains, but Aizawa, he would turn around and realize right then and there that those weren't fake villains. No, these were real villains. Aizawa could tell a real villain from a fake just by looking at them. He'd been in the game for like 20 plus years now. Aizawa, he would tell all of the students to get behind him. He would explain the situation to each and every last one of them. He would activate Erasure, trying to erase as many quirks as possible, while also apprehending the villains as well. Izuku, he would have been told by Alpha 1 to keep low cover until All Might arrived. He would of course do exactly that. He would be watching from the sidelines. Izuku would watch as many villains manage to be defeated by the students and their teacher alike. Izuku would have recognized the hero as a race ahead, and he would actually be impressed by the man's skills. He found it to be pathetic that so many villains were getting defeated by first years though. Eventually, one of the kids would escape. They would get the faculty of UA to arrive at the USJ. The first to arrive though would be All Might. Although All Might managed to defeat the Nomu in combat, he would find that it wasn't over just yet. Shigaraki would laugh when seeing that All Might thought that he was victorious. They had a backup plan in case the Nomu lost after all. All Might would be confused until what people had dubbed the Red Hulk walked up to be right beside Shigaraki. All Might would be working with fumes right now. He would do his best in order to fight off Izuku, but he would find that this giant was too strong for him. They weren't like the Nomu where they were just fighting like a rabid animal with no rhyme or reason. This guy actually had some reasoning to his attacks. They were calculated. They were also becoming a lot warmer as the fight went on. All Might was beginning to suffocate from the heat, and his clothes were burning up too. While All Might was getting weaker, Izuku was using more of his strength. It seemed to All Might that Izuku was just getting stronger as the fight prolonged, but no. Izuku was just holding back less. He wasn't pulling his punches as much. He just wanted to get a feel for All Might at first, but as the fight continued, he realized that All Might really was just a shell of his former self. All Might would be brought to his knees. He would be struggling to breathe right now. Many students would be concerned watching the fight between All Might and Izuku, or well, the Red Hulk. Izuku, he would grab All Might by the neck and he would lift him up high into the sky for everyone to see. All Might's neck would have been scorched from the heat coming off of Izuku's body. Izuku would declare to everyone that the feeble man they saw in front of them was actually All Might's true form. He had managed to wear him down to the point that he could no longer continue to maintain his image made of lies. He would rip off the man's head before tossing the barely recognizable feature over to one of the students. This would basically be horrifying to many of the students. They would all be horrified at this revelation. Other heroes would arrive at the scene, but it would have already been too late. The villains had won They would try to attack the remaining villains, but Izuku, he would have been too much of a tank for them to do any real damage. Izuku would have also been rather fast, contrary to his size. Izuku would end the lives of every hero there except Aizawa. Aizawa had tried erasing Izuku's quake multiple times, but no matter what, it was ineffective. He didn't get why though. He thought for sure this was a quake. Izuku would have left Aizawa for last. He would walk up to the man before squatting down to his level. He would explain why his quake couldn't be erased, and, well, the reasoning behind it was because of the fact that it was artificially made. You see, when it came onto that explosion from 2 years ago at Island, that was what actually made him what he was today. Aizawa's eyes would widen in shock. He never thought it was possible to gain an artificial quake, especially one so powerful. The last thing Aizawa would end up seeing was a red hand reaching to grab his face. Not too long afterward did Aizawa's head get crushed in Izuku's grip. Shigaraki would leave the rest of the students, seeing them as a waste of his time since Izuku managed to accomplish all that they really wanted to do here. Izuku would be praised for his work by all for one. They were one step closer to making a better world. From there, it was simply chaos. With there no longer being a symbol of peace, criminal activity just increased drastically. More heroes were out on the streets, but the criminals had their own symbol to look up to now. That, of course, being the Red Hulk. Izuku would slaughter heroes left and right. He would continue to grow in infamy while preaching about making the world a better place once they completely got rid of the old flawed system. All for One would be pulling the strings though from the shadows, from building connections. With Izuku's increasing influence, the League of Villains would grow. Multiple villains would want to join the League. Eventually, they would even get the attention of Chisaki and the Yakuza. All for One, he would sit by Izuku and Shigaraki as they discussed working together with Chisaki. Chisaki would mention that the League of Villains joining the Yakuza would be a wise decision, rather than the other way around. Shigaraki would glare at Chisaki though. This wasn't what they thought the meeting was going to be about. All for One would stay silent though. Izuku would mention the current relevance in today's media compared to the Yakuza though. Chisaki would question if they even had a real plan for what to do with all of this new manpower. Izuku would explain how they would completely collapse the current hero society, bring it into anarchy, and then rebuild from there with All for One at the top. All for One was the key to making the world a better place after all. Chisaki would realize he wasn't getting through to Izuku, and he would just insult his cause. The room's temperature would begin to heat up though when Izuku heard Chisaki's rude remark. Izuku would walk up to Chisaki and he would grab him by the collar. In response, Chisaki would slip off one of his gloves and touch Izuku's arm. Izuku would explode, shocking everyone in the room. Chisaki would smooth out the wrinkles Izuku had made on his suit. Everyone would be hesitant on what to do next, now that Izuku was seemingly dead. Chisaki just killed the villain's symbol. Chisaki would leave, making sure word spread about how he managed to kill the once undefeatable Red Hulk. He went to realize though that Izuku was actually still alive. He was just regenerating. and it was taking him a while too. It would have taken a couple of hours for Izuku to be brought back to 100% capacity, but once he was brought back to 100%, he would immediately go searching for Chisaki. He wanted to ruffle a couple of feathers when it came on to that guy. Well, maybe a little more than just feathers. Chisaki, hearing that Izuku was still alive, would be shocked. Just how powerful was that guy's regeneration? This would have been the question that Chisaki was asking himself. Izuku, he would eventually find Chisaki's hideout, and he would be prepared this time. Chisaki would use his quirk in order to defend against Izuku, but nothing he did to the environment around them would slow him down. Izuku would punch through Chisaki's chest, killing him. He would make his way over to the rest of the Yakuza, and he would advise for them all to join the League of Villains in order to guarantee protection while the world was beginning to crumble. A few would refuse, but most would actually end up joining Izuku's cause at this point. Izuku would focus on taking over the rest of Japan from there on, killing off all who dared oppose all for one. Heroes from other countries, they would try to intervene, but most would either switch sides or just die fighting. Izuku's army would continue to grow from there as they moved on to deal with other countries. It would be a hard-fought war, but in the end, All for One would reign supreme, and Izuku would be his poster boy. And that is how we basically end this What If, people. So it is your boy King Titan X signing out. You guys already know the deal. Check the description because I have the link to my Discord and Purple Heart Neptune's channel on top of their Wattpad that they're working on. If you guys are interested, please be sure to check out the description and check the links. Click the links. Also, what else do I have to mention? If you liked the video, like. If you liked my content for a while now and you're not subscribed, then now is the perfect time to subscribe. Also, leave a comment and share. And yeah, that is all I have to say. King Titan X out.